Limerence is a form of romantic obsession. It's an infatuation that exceeds normal infatuation, and it's usually always directed at a limerent object that is unattainable, unavailable, aloof, and maybe not even someone that you know. Have you ever experienced something like this where you put someone else on a pedestal completely and you're more in love with a fantasy version of who they are than with the real human version of them because they're so unattainable? Limerence is also called love addiction, and it's really, really painful. The thing about limerence is that it can only exist as long as the person is out of reach. If you actually ended up getting the limerent object, meaning the person is in a relationship with you, they commit to you, they marry you, then the limerence has to stop, because then you have to face reality of who this person really is. So limerence is a type of escape. It's a type of addiction that allows you to escape from your reality and focus all of your energy and attention in this specific direction. You don't have to deal with your trauma. You don't have to deal with the job you don't like. You don't have to deal with your loneliness. You can just focus all this intense love and thought into this other unattainable person. I'm sure you can already agree with me that this is incredibly unhealthy. It causes you to detach from reality, and believe me when I say it completely destroys people's lives. Love addiction. It doesn't sound that serious, right? It's not like a real addiction. It's not like being an alcoholic or being addicted to drugs. Yes, it is. You are addicted to the escape of this other person, of the hormones that are released in your body when you're thinking about this other person, of the fantasy life that you could be living with them, on thinking of how they could come and save you from your reality. Because the other thing about limerence is that it usually thrives when you are feeling really low. So when you are broken, when you've gone through some kind of life event that completely destroyed you, when your self-esteem is at its lowest, that is when limerence thrives, because that's when you need the escape. People who have this type of addiction, limerent addiction, they completely neglect at the end stages of limerence, they completely neglect everything else in their lives. Job, relationships, family relationships, their personal, mental, physical well-being. It just becomes all about this other person, and they're willing to give it all up just for a moment with that person or a chance. They're really longing for that reciprocation, even though, remember, if they actually do get the reciprocation, the limerence will eventually die out and those feelings won't exist. So someone who is really addicted to limerence, in that case, they would start being limerent for some other limerent object. Let's say they get the person they actually want, they get in a relationship, they start feeling bored because they don't get those emotional highs and lows that they're used to. And then they start thinking about an ex. Then they start thinking about someone at their work who's married that they can't be with. They'll find a way to keep that biochemical roller coaster going. So let's talk about the key characteristics of limerence. The first one is that it's obsessive. It's obsessive thinking. It's like OCD. You can't stop it. You think about this person all the time. Obsessive behaviors. You check their social media all the time. You walk by their house or hang out at the cafe just around the corner from where they work. You become a little bit of a stalker. In your own way, hopefully not in a too exaggerated way, but it can even end up there with limerence. But for most people, it's more like checking social media and maybe trying to go to places where they could run into this person who's their limerent object. Another characteristic is, as I said, an idealization of the limerent object. So in your mind, this limerent object is perfect. The perfect man, the perfect woman, the perfect person. They're loving, they're kind, they're fulfilling all of your needs. They would be, right? If you could have them, they would be fulfilling all of your needs. They would rescue you. They're flawless, right? Oh, how good does it feel to think that someone could be flawless, that someone could save you from yourself and from your life and the things that you're unhappy about. So you put them on a pedestal in a very, very unhealthy way. So it also makes you feel that they're above you, but they're definitely above everyone else. But it also makes you, in a way, feel even worse about yourself because they're so unattainable above you on this pedestal and you're just worshiping them. This idea that there is someone out there who is a perfect person, it's a very, tempting fantasy. The reality is that people are people, humans are humans, and everybody is flawed. Even the most perfect person that you can imagine, they have lots of flaws and they would not be fulfilling all of your needs. That's the hard truth. They wouldn't. Nobody can fulfill all of your needs. You have to do part of that yourself and you have to spread it out a little. Even if you're with a partner and you're married and you're happy together, the partner cannot fulfill every single need you have. It's just not realistic. Next, we have the intense emotional highs and lows. So this is the roller coaster I've been talking about. You feel euphoria if they glance at your direction, or if you get a text message from them, or even if they post something new on their Insta. Sometimes people start seeing signs, which is that's really a warning sign that it has gone too far. They start seeing signs and small things that this person posts on their Insta or on TikTok, and they start reading into that. Oh, was that for me? Oh, because he saw me with a red dress and now he's posting a photo of a red flower. Is that secretly a message for me? It isn't. If the person isn't telling you directly that they want to be with you, that they're interested in you, then what they're doing is not directed at you. I had a client once who was in love with someone who was a medium celebrity, right? And she would genuinely think that when he was posting something, that it was directed at her, because she was sending him messages all the time on Instagram and he wasn't responding, right? But I think once he liked a post, or a comment that she had made, and then she felt like they had this connection. So it was very serious. It was beyond, I couldn't help her actually. I had to decline working with this client because she needed a psychologist or a therapist, but I did have an introductory call with her where she shared this with me. And she would think that this celebrity was communicating with her because he was posting lasagna and she loved lasagna, and he was, so that's really delusional, completely delusional thinking. And while this is a bit extreme, there are different degrees of limerence, and someone can also it can be more normal than this. It can be a person that you know and you feel like they're posting something and it's sort of directed at you. But if it was, then they would just message you and be more direct about wanting to date you. Which leads me to the next characteristic, which is that you choose fantasy over reality. Sometimes people who have limerence, they even avoid confronting the person who's their limerent object because they're afraid of the rejection, and they would rather choose to keep on living in this fantasy rather than confronting the person saying, I have so many feelings for you, do you want to go on a date with me? Because then they would be rejected and then they couldn't stay in this fantasy land of limerence. So it's often that a person who is deep into limerence will choose not to take action on their limerence so they can stay. It's subconscious, all of this, but so they can stay in this limerence stage because it can feel so delicious. Just like any drug, any addiction, when you're high, it feels so good. When you're low, believe me, limerence can take you so low, which is very, very dangerous. But when you're high, it feels so good. So how does limerence differ from love? Okay, first of all, limerence is one-sided. It is idealized. It is not based in reality. Okay, you don't actually love the person. You don't actually know them well enough to love them, because when you idealize someone, you have created a fantasy version of who they are. You don't really see them. So you don't really know if you really love them. You love the thought of them, the thought of that version of them that you have created, but you don't know them. Love is different. Love is two-sided. Relationships are two-sided. And they are about knowing a flawed person and loving that person for who they are. It's not about idealizing a person. It's about seeing very clearly who they are and then loving what you're seeing. The cause of limerence is pretty devastating, and it's often rooted in childhood and childhood neglect. It's very common that people who grew up with caregivers who weren't giving them attention, who were unavailable, who maybe had personality disorders, were alcoholics, other addicts, or just had attachment styles that made them be parents that could not invest so much time and energy into the child. They create this ability to see love where there is no love. Did their parents love them? Probably. Did they show it and show up every day? Probably not, right? So they would create, when they were little, they would create this fantasy version of mom and dad, right? Yeah, mom, she never cooks for me. She is drunk every day. She passes out, but she loves me and she's a good mom. And, you know, so they would create, because it's very difficult for children to accept the reality, and they are so dependent on their caregivers. So they sort of have to create this ability in order to survive and not to sink into deep depression. So this ability to see love where there really isn't love is usually created in childhood. It can also come from insecure attachment styles. Someone who has, for example, anxious attachment or even avoidant attachment, they can be more prone to limerence, but again, that would again be rooted in childhood experiences where they've, you know, for the anxious person and the avoidant person, they have their own childhood trauma to deal with. I've made some videos about anxious and avoidant attachment. You can watch the anxious one here, and then I'll link to the avoidant one in just a moment up here as well. And then it can also come from a deep state of depression. It can come from really low self-esteem and from you being in a time and a place in your life where nothing else is really giving you that sparkly feeling of goodness and happiness that life has to offer. So you are creating it. People can even fall in love with fictional characters on TV. And I'm just being honest, it's just about creating that feeling. That's what limerence is about. So it's really devastating, and the thing about limerence is that it holds you back from actually meeting someone who could love you, because you're in love with someone else, a fictional fantasy figment of your imagination. So you could go out there and actually find real love, but limerence is blocking you from that. Limerence is blocking you from everything that is good in your real life, in reality, and that's why you need to end it. Once you've realized that this is what's going on for you, you need to end it, and I'm going to help you here. So here's what you do when you realize this is me, I need to deal with this limerence and get back to reality. The first thing you're going to do is that you're going to name it. It takes a bit of the romance out of it. You're going to realize, okay, this person is not whatever the person's name is, this person is my limerent object. And the reason I feel like this about them is because I've created a fantasy version of who they are. So educate yourself on limerence and name it. It's way less romantic when you do that. And it already feels a little bit like a downer, you know, to realize that, okay, so this romantic fantasy that I had was actually just a figment of my imagination that I am using as an escape to escape from my life where I'm not happy. So you have to name it, and then you have to start step by step rooting yourself back into reality, which means you have to start creating a life that you don't need to escape from. I said this before in other videos. It's super helpful when it comes to everything. Create a life that you don't need to escape from. And that means it's going to be tough in the beginning because you're going to have to realistically look at your life. Do I like my job? Do I like my education? Do I like the way I look? Do I need to start going to the gym? Do I need to start eating better? Do I need to improve? Do I need to move? Do I need to seek out new friendships? Do I need to, what is missing in your life? You need to look at that really honestly. And if you don't do this step, you're not going to get over limerence. It's going to be too tempting for you to go back. So you have to do the hard work of starting step by step to create a life that actually makes you feel good and makes you feel fulfilled. Start building your self-esteem. And of course, you can work with a professional to build your self-esteem. You're welcome to reach out to me. There's a link here below where you can book a free call, actually a 15-minute, no, it's a $1, I think, call as an introduction, and then we can take it from there. So you can work with professionals who can help you build your self-esteem back, get back to who you are, get your life back on track, and then let go of this person. You need to unfollow them on social media. If you can block them, block them. If they're going to the same gym as you, you stop going to that gym. You just need to go completely no contact with this person because it's an addiction. So if you were addicted to alcohol and you wanted to quit, you wouldn't be drinking 2 beers every Friday night. You would just quit, because just a little sliver of the cake is going to make you eat the whole cake. So you cannot be around this person. It's too tempting for you. They're the limerent object and they cannot exist in your life or your reality anymore. So you need to build emotional resilience. You need to find routines that make you feel better. Maybe you start mindfulness exercises. You start walking every morning. You start feeling good in your body, putting on music and dancing, just finding ways to get that dopamine, to feel good about yourself. Set new goals for yourself. That one is important as well. Is there something you've always wanted to do, always wanted to achieve, a trip to Italy? What is there something you can work towards that you can put all your attention into right now that's good for you, healthy for you, and rooted in reality? Instead of wasting, because yes, you are wasting your time obsessing about this person. I hope this video was helpful. If you have any comments, you can write them down below. If you liked the video, please like it and subscribe to my channel, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.